Lake Harrison stood at the center of the extravagant party, a swirl of lights and laughter enveloping him like an expensive silk cloak. The lavish affair, held in a sprawling mansion overlooking the glittering city skyline, was a showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, refracting light into a dazzling spectrum that danced across the polished marble floor. Guests adorned in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled effortlessly, their conversations punctuated by the clinking of champagne glasses and peals of laughter that echoed through the grand halls. Despite the opulence surrounding him, Lake felt a gnawing emptiness deep inside. He smiled and charmed those around him, but each exchange felt hollow, a rehearsed script played out to perfection. As he moved through the crowd, he engaged in shallow conversations with industry peers, discussing the latest blockbuster films and upcoming projects, but his mind drifted elsewhere. He watched couples twirl on the dance floor, their movements fluid and graceful, and felt an ache in his chest that he couldn't quite place. "Lake, darling," a voice called out, pulling him from his reverie. It was Veronica, a glamorous actress known for her role in a hit television series. She approached him, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders, and leaned in close, her breath sweet with the scent of expensive perfume. "You simply must invest in my new film. It's going to be monumental." "Of course, Veronica. I wouldn't miss it for the world," Lake replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He watched her flit away, already in search of her next target, and felt a wave of loneliness wash over him. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, they all felt like a distant echo, a reminder of a life filled with fleeting connections and superficiality. As the night wore on, Lake excused himself from the throng of guests, needing a moment of solitude to gather his thoughts. He stepped outside onto the balcony, where the cool night air caressed his skin. Looking out over the city, he could see the lights flickering like stars against the dark canvas of the night. It was beautiful, yet it only deepened his sense of isolation. He had everything a man could desire: wealth, power, and fame. But what was it all worth if he couldn't find genuine connection? Lost in thought, he wandered away from the party, his footsteps echoing against the cobblestone path. He meandered through the quiet streets, the sounds of the party fading behind him until only the distant hum of the city remained. It was then that he stumbled upon a small park, dimly lit and nearly deserted. A shiver ran down his spine as he approached a figure huddled on a bench, wrapped in a tattered blanket. "Excuse me," he said tentatively, unsure of how to approach a stranger in such a vulnerable state. The figure looked up, revealing a woman with striking features: high cheekbones, wild curls, and piercing eyes that seemed to hold stories of their own. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was a resilience about her that intrigued him. "Do you have any spare change?" she asked, her voice soft yet firm. There was no pleading in her tone. Instead, it was a simple request, grounded in the reality of her situation. Lake hesitated, taken aback by her directness. He rummaged through his pockets, pulling out a few crumpled bills. "Here," he said, handing them to her. "It's not much, but every little bit helps," she replied, accepting the money with a nod. "Thank you." He found himself drawn to her, compelled by the strength that radiated from her despite her circumstances. "What's your name?" he asked, surprising himself with his curiosity. "Madison," she said, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "And you are?" Lake Harrison." He watched as her expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "The entertainment mogul?" she asked, skepticism lacing her words. "You don't seem like the type to be out here on your own." "I guess I'm full of surprises," he replied, offering a small smile. "What brings you to this part of town?" Madison shrugged, the weight of her past evident in her posture. "Just trying to get by, like everyone else." She glanced around, the darkness of the park enveloping them. "It's not easy, you know?" "I can only imagine," Lake said, feeling a pang of guilt for his own privilege. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Her gaze softened, and for a moment, he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You don't have to. Just talking to someone is enough sometimes." They fell into conversation, discovering a shared understanding that transcended their vastly different worlds. Lake listened as Madison spoke about her dreams, her aspirations, and the circumstances that led her to where she was now. She had once been a vibrant artist, full of hope and ambition, but life had taken unexpected turns, leaving her adrift. As the night deepened, an undeniable connection sparked between them. Lake found himself captivated by her spirit, her laughter, and the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of art. It was a refreshing change from the superficiality of the party he had just left behind. The hours slipped away unnoticed, and as the moon hung high in the sky, Lake felt an overwhelming desire to protect Madison, to offer her a glimmer of hope in her dark world. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I want to help you. I can get you back on your feet." Madison studied him for a moment, uncertainty flickering in her gaze. "Why would you want to do that?" she asked, her skepticism returning. "Because I can," he answered simply, "and because I can't just walk away from someone like you." With the weight of his words hanging in the air, Lake reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. The touch ignited something within him, a spark of warmth that chased away the lingering emptiness. Madison's breath hitched, and in that moment, the world around them faded into insignificance. What began as a casual encounter quickly escalated into an intense moment of passion. Their lips met, and the kiss was electric, charged with unspoken desires and the promise of something more. Lake pulled her closer, his heart racing as he lost himself in the connection they shared. It was a fleeting moment, and yet it felt monumental, a collision of two worlds that had long been apart. Afterward, as they sat together, the reality of their encounter settled in. Lake's mind raced with thoughts of what he had just done, the magnitude of the situation crashing over him like a tidal wave. He turned to Madison, his heart pounding. "I want to help you, Madison. I really do. Let me support you." Madison smiled softly, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "I don't know what that would look like," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Let's figure it out together," he said, determination flooding his veins. "I'll make sure you have everything you need. You deserve a chance at a better life." As the first light of dawn began to break, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Lake felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, he was ready to step outside the confines of his extravagant life and embrace the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Little did he know, this encounter would change the trajectory of both their lives forever, setting in motion a series of events that would lead to revelations he could never have anticipated. Lake Harrison sat on the edge of his immaculately designed penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like a sea of stars. The extravagant parties, the glamorous guests, and the endless stream of champagne had lost their luster. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life, existing in a world where everyone seemed to be in on a joke he wasn't aware of. The news of Madison's unexpected pregnancy rang in his mind like a bell tolling for him. Responsibility was a foreign concept in his world of excess, but the weight of impending fatherhood loomed over him like a storm cloud. He picked up his phone and stared at it, his thumb hovering over the contact list. He needed advice, but who could he trust? His closest friends were more likely to mock his situation than offer any real guidance. Finally, he dialed Jason, his best friend since college, who answered on the third ring, his laughter echoing through the line. "Lake, just got back from the Bahamas. You wouldn't believe the parties, man." Jason's voice was filled with excitement, but it felt distant to Lake, almost like a stranger's. "Yeah, Jason. I need to talk," Lake said, trying to keep his tone serious. "Talk? What's up? You sound like someone just stole your last drink." "It's about Madison," he began, his heart racing. "She's pregnant." There was a pause, and Lake could almost hear Jason's brain whirring. "Wait, what? The homeless girl? Are you kidding me?" Jason burst out laughing. "Dude, this is epic. You're going to be a dad. How crazy is that?" "It's not funny, Jason," Lake snapped, frustration bubbling to the surface. "This is serious. I don't know how to handle this." "Seriously? You're Lake Harrison. You could hire an army of nannies and still party like a rock star. What's the big deal?" Lake felt his shoulders tense. I don't want to just throw money at it. I want to do the right thing. Right thing? Come on, man. You're a billionaire. Just keep her around for the baby and let her do her thing. It's not like you're marrying her. Why does everyone think this is a joke? Lake exclaimed, his voice rising. This is my life we're talking about. This is my child. Jason's tone shifted, the laughter replaced by a hint of concern. Look, I get it. But you're not cut out for this kind of commitment. You need to think this through. Lake hung up, frustration clawing at him. He looked around the lavish penthouse, the walls adorned with art he had purchased on a whim, the furniture more suited for show than comfort. The emptiness in his chest grew heavier. He needed to take control of the situation, not just for himself but for Madison and the baby. The next day, Lake drove through the affluent neighborhoods, trying to envision a life that included his child. He stopped in front of a charming house with a white picket fence, something straight out of a movie. It felt surreal to imagine the life he could provide for Madison and their baby. He envisioned nursery colors, toys scattered across the floor, and laughter filling the halls. With a surge of determination, he made the purchase discreetly, ensuring that Madison would never know it was him. He filled the home with baby supplies, cribs, clothes, toys, and everything a new mother might need. It was a small gesture, but it made him feel like he was finally stepping up. The day he presented the house to Madison was etched in his mind. He had arranged for her to meet him there under the pretense of discussing the baby. The light in her eyes when she entered was worth every penny he had spent. Lake, this is incredible, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I wanted you to have a safe place to stay, he replied, trying to sound casual. But why? You don't owe me anything. I know I don't, but I want to be there for you, for our child. I want to help. Madison's expression softened, but there was a flicker of hesitation. You're serious about this? Absolutely. They spent the next few weeks settling into their new routine, and for the first time, Lake felt a sense of purpose. He even made an effort to attend prenatal appointments with Madison, sitting in the waiting room surrounded by expectant couples. The experience was both enlightening and terrifying, and he reveled in the glow of Madison's smile whenever they spoke about their future. But just as quickly as his life began to shift toward responsibility, tragedy struck. It was a rainy night when he received a call that would change everything. He had been at an event, laughing and mingling, when his phone vibrated insistently in his pocket. Lake, it's urgent. You need to come to the hospital, his assistant said, her voice trembling. What happened? His heart raced as he stepped outside, rain pelting against his skin. It's a car accident. Madison. The world fell silent as his assistant's words faded into a blur. He rushed to the hospital, each second stretching into an eternity. The sterile scent of antiseptic and the beeping of machines assaulted his senses. When he reached the emergency room, he was met with grim faces and hushed whispers. Where is she? He demanded, his voice a mix of panic and desperation. Lake, I'm so sorry. There was an accident. Madison didn't make it, the doctor said, his gaze heavy with sympathy. Lake felt the air leave his lungs. What about the baby? The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a knife twisting in his heart. I'm sorry. We couldn't save them. He staggered back, collapsing into a chair, the weight of despair crashing over him like a tidal wave. The vibrant dreams he had built crumbled in an instant, leaving behind a void that felt impossible to fill. In the days that followed, Lake spiraled into darkness. He avoided friends, canceled meetings, and stopped attending the parties that once defined him. He could no longer muster the energy to pretend. The tabloids spun wild tales of his decline, but he paid them no mind. They didn't know the truth. Instead, he threw himself into charity work, trying to distract himself from the pain. He organized events, raised funds for children's health, and buried himself in the idea that, perhaps, helping others could fill the abyss inside him. But no matter how many lives he touched, he could never shake the haunting memory of what could have been, of the family he would never have. As the years passed, Lake became a recluse. The world outside continued to thrive, but he remained locked away in his grief. The laughter of children at charity events echoed hollowly in his ears, reminding him of the joy he had lost. Each night he returned to his empty penthouse, the silence a stark reminder of his choices. He would often stand at the window, gazing out at the city that once felt like his playground. Now, it felt like a prison. He wondered if he would ever escape the chains of sorrow that bound him. The pain of loss was a specter that haunted him, and he feared it would always be a part of him. Yet, in the depths of his despair, a flicker of hope remained. He had dedicated himself to making a difference, to honor Madison and the child they would never know. With every event he organized, he clung to the belief that maybe, just maybe, he could find some semblance of redemption. Lake Harrison stood backstage, his heart racing as he prepared for the benefit concert. He had spent the last 5 years trying to erase the shadows of his past, pouring his energy into philanthropy and charity work. The concert was meant to be a turning point, a chance to channel his guilt and pain into something noble. Yet, as he glanced out at the audience, he felt a familiar emptiness gnawing at him, a reminder of the family he lost, the responsibility he abandoned. The stage lights illuminated his form, casting a glow that made him look almost ethereal. As the crowd cheered, he took a deep breath, ready to belt out the first notes of a song that had become an anthem for healing. The lyrics flowed effortlessly from his lips, a mixture of sorrow and hope, and he poured his soul into every word. Each chord struck a chord within him, echoing the void where Madison and their child once filled his life with light and laughter. As he performed, Lake's gaze drifted to the front row, where a young girl caught his attention. She was singing along, her eyes shining with a joy that seemed out of place in the world Lake inhabited. There was an innocence about her, a reminder of all the things he had lost. His heart ached at the sight. He'd seen children like her in the hospitals he visited, bright souls battling dark circumstances, and he couldn't help but wonder if any of them had been like his daughter. After the final note rang out, the crowd erupted into applause, but Lake found himself lost in thought. He stepped off the stage, his mind racing with questions about the girl. Who was she? Did she have a mother? Was she healthy? As he walked through the backstage area, he ordered his thoughts but failed to shake the image of her face from his mind. Moments later, Emily approached him, her small frame dwarfed by the towering backdrop of the stage. Her bright smile was infectious, and Lake felt an unexpected warmth wash over him. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice soft yet confident. "You were amazing up there." "Thank you, sweetheart," he replied, crouching down to meet her gaze. "What's your name?" "Emily," she said, her eyes sparkling. "You know, my mom always talks about you. She says you helped us so much." Lake's heart skipped a beat. "Your mom?" he asked, curiosity piqued. "What does she say?" Emily's smile widened. "She says you brought light into our lives when everything was dark." The innocence in her voice struck Lake like a bolt of lightning. He felt a rush of emotions, a mix of hope, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of longing. The words echoed in his mind. Light. That was a word he had not thought of in years. "Your mom sounds like a wonderful person," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What does she do?" "She's a doctor," Emily exclaimed proudly, her small hands gesturing animatedly. "She helps kids like me stay healthy. She says it's important to make sure everyone has a chance to be happy." Lake's heart raced. A doctor? Madison, the woman he had met that fateful night, had become a doctor? It painted a picture of resilience and strength that he had never imagined. "That's incredible," he said, genuine admiration seeping into his tone. "I'm sure she's making a huge difference." "Yeah, she is." Emily nodded vigorously. "And she always tells me stories about you. You know, how you used to come to visit us and bring presents. She says you're a hero." A lump formed in Lake's throat. Hero? He had never seen himself that way. The word felt foreign, especially when he thought of the life he had led before meeting Madison. "I was just trying to help," he said softly, feeling a mix of pride and guilt at the same time. "But it sounds like your mom is the real hero." Emily giggled, her laughter brightening the dimly lit backstage area. "No, you really are. She says you've done so much for kids who need it." Lake was taken aback by the impact he had made, albeit unknowingly. It was a feeling he had longed for, validation that he was doing something right in a world that had once seemed so dark. "Can I ask you something, Emily?" he said, leaning closer, his voice low and earnest. "What's your favorite thing about your mom?" Emily's expression turned thoughtful. "She always makes time for me, even when she's busy. We play games and read stories together. And she always tells me to be kind to everyone, no matter what." The words resonated deeply within Lake, reminding him of the values he had grown up with. But there was something more, something that felt like a connection, a thread linking them across time and circumstance. "That's really special," he said, a bittersweet smile crossing his lips. "Your mom sounds like she's raised you to be a wonderful person."
Thanks.
Emily beamed, her enthusiasm infectious. "You should meet her. I know she'd be so happy to see you. You really helped us, you know?" Lake's heart raced at the thought. Meet Madison? After all these years? The idea was exhilarating yet terrifying. He felt a whirlwind of emotions: fear of rejection, hope for reconciliation, and the overwhelming wish to be part of their lives again. "Maybe one day," he said carefully, gauging his own feelings. "I'd love to meet her." Suddenly, a voice broke through the moment, pulling Lake from his thoughts. "Emily, there you are." A woman approached, her face a mixture of concern and relief. She was striking, with features that reminded him of Madison, though softened by the years. "I was looking everywhere for you." "Mom," Emily exclaimed, rushing to the woman's side. "You won't believe what I just did. I met Mr. Harrison." Lake froze as the woman turned to him, her eyes widening in recognition. He felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him, and time had come to a standstill. The energy in the room changed, crackling with tension and unspoken words. "Lake," she breathed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. "Madison." His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it echoed in the space between them, laden with years of regret and unfulfilled dreams. For a moment, they stood there, locked in an unyielding gaze, memories flooding back uninvited. The laughter, the connection, the promise of a future that had been so cruelly snatched away. Lake's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of elation and trepidation. He had found her, yet the weight of the past loomed heavy, casting shadows over their reunion. "Emily, honey, why don't you go get some ice cream?" "I'll be right there," Madison said gently, her eyes never leaving Lake's. "Okay," Emily replied, skipping away, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing between the two adults. The air thickened with unspoken words as Lake and Madison faced each other, the world around them fading into the background. He took a step forward, aching to bridge the chasm that had grown between them, but fear held him back. "I thought you were," he started, his voice trailing off, unable to finish the thought. "Dead." Madison finished for him, the pain evident in her voice. "I know. I thought you were gone too. But it was just a misunderstanding, Lake." The words hung heavily in the air, and Lake felt a whirlwind of emotions crash over him. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Madison's expression softened, but there was a flicker of caution in her eyes. "I know you didn't, but it's not just about us anymore. There's Emily. I want to be part of her life," Lake said urgently, desperation creeping into his voice. "I never knew. I thought—" Madison held up her hand, silencing him with a gesture. "We need to talk. About everything." The weight of their shared past hung between them, a tapestry woven with love, loss, and the unyielding desire for redemption. And as they stood there, caught in the fragile web of their history, Lake realized that this was just the beginning. A chance to reclaim the family he thought he had lost forever. Lake Harrison stood in the dimly lit backstage area of the concert hall, his heart still racing from the performance he had just delivered. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of excitement and admiration from the audience, but his mind was preoccupied with Emily, the young girl who had captivated him from the moment he laid eyes on her. The way she sang along to his songs, her face alight with joy, stirred something deep within him, a feeling he thought had long been extinguished. Emily, right? Lake asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he gestured for her to take a seat on a plush couch nearby. The backstage area was filled with the remnants of the concert, empty water bottles, scattered set lists, and the lingering scent of sweat and adrenaline. Yes, Mr. Harrison, Emily replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I loved your concert. You're amazing. Thank you, he said, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. But I'm curious, what's your favorite part? Emily paused, her brow furrowing in thought. I loved when you sang that song about hope. My mom says it always makes her feel better when she's having a tough day. Lake felt a lump form in his throat at the mention of her mother. Your mom sounds like a really strong person. She is, Emily beamed. She's a doctor now, and she helps kids who are sick. She says it's important to bring happiness to their lives. The words struck Lake like a bolt of lightning, igniting a flicker of recognition deep within him. A doctor, huh? That's incredible. What kind of doctor is she? A pediatrician, Emily replied, her enthusiasm unabated. She helps kids just like me. She always says that laughter is the best medicine. Lake leaned forward, his heart pounding against his chest. What's her name, if you don't mind me asking? Madison, Emily said, her voice bright and clear, as if she were sharing a treasured secret. She loves to help people. She always tells me that kindness can change the world. The name hit Lake like a freight train, and he felt the world around him tilt. Madison, his Madison, the woman he had lost in a whirlwind of tragedy and guilt. The realization spiraled in his mind. Could this girl before him truly be his daughter? The very thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Emily, Lake hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you think I could meet your mother? Emily's eyes widened with surprise. You want to meet her? Really? Yes, he said earnestly, his heart racing as he grappled with the emotions flooding through him. I need to understand what happened after everything. Emily tilted her head, her innocent expression a mix of curiosity and concern. You mean after the accident? Mom always said it was a really hard time for her. She was scared, but she never stopped believing in you. Lake's chest tightened at her words. Scared? Yeah, Emily continued, her tone shifting to a more serious note. She was worried that you wouldn't want to see her again, but she told me you were like a light in her life, and that you made her feel special. The confession struck a chord deep within him, igniting a flicker of hope that had long been buried beneath layers of guilt and despair. She thought I wouldn't want to see her? Lake echoed, anger and regret intertwining in his voice. I never stopped wanting to see her. I thought she and the baby were gone. Emily shifted in her seat, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mom always said you were a good man, even when things got tough. She never stopped caring about you, Mr. Harrison. Lake felt the weight of her words settle heavily on his shoulders. The years of regret and loss began to unravel in his mind, revealing the possibility of a future he had never dared to dream of. Emily, do you think your mom would be open to seeing me? The girl's face brightened with a smile that could light up the darkest of nights. I think she would love to see you, but you need to be honest with her. She's had a lot of hurt, and she deserves to know that you're really sorry. I will be, Lake promised, a newfound determination surging through him. I'll make things right. I owe her that much. As they spoke, a bond began to form between the two of them, a connection woven together by shared history and unspoken emotions. Lake found himself laughing at Emily's stories about her life, her adventures at school, and her dreams of becoming a writer. The laughter felt foreign yet comforting, a reminder of the joy he had forgotten in the wake of his despair. Do you think I could write a story about you? Emily asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I could call it The Man Who Brought Light into Our Lives. Lake chuckled at her enthusiasm, but the title resonated with him in ways he couldn't articulate. I would be honored, Emily, but I think the real story is about your mom and how strong she is. Mom says everyone has a story, Emily replied, her expression turning thoughtful. And I think yours is really important too. You should tell it. Just then, a commotion echoed through the backstage area as crew members rushed about, preparing for a post-concert celebration. The vibrant atmosphere reminded Lake of the world he had once thrived in, a world filled with glamour, excitement, and fleeting connections. But now, standing there with Emily, he felt a different kind of excitement, a longing for something more meaningful. "Emily," he said, his voice steady and sincere, "I need to find your mom. Can you help me?" "Of course," she exclaimed, bouncing in her seat. "I can tell her you're looking for her. She'll be so happy." As they continued to talk, Lake felt a sense of purpose awaken within him. He was no longer just the entertainment mogul drowning in his past mistakes. He was a father, Emily's father, and perhaps, one day, Madison's partner again. He imagined the possibility of their family, the warmth and love that could be rekindled, and the laughter that could fill their lives. "Just promise me one thing," Emily said, her expression turning serious once more. "If you see my mom, promise you'll be real with her. She needs to know you care." "I promise," Lake replied, his heart swelling with emotion. "I'll do whatever it takes to make her see that I've changed." As the backstage area buzzed with activity, Lake felt a wave of determination wash over him. He was ready to face his past, ready to confront the mistakes that had haunted him for years. With Emily by his side, he felt a renewed sense of hope, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could reclaim the family he had lost. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Lake was ready to embrace the challenge. He knew that the road to redemption would be long and fraught with obstacles, but with Emily's unwavering belief in him, he was ready to take the first step toward reuniting with Madison and discovering what it truly meant to be a father. Lake Harrison sat in his expansive office, the walls adorned with accolades and framed magazine covers celebrating his life of excess. Yet, amid the glitz and glamour, a gnawing emptiness consumed him. He had spent the past 5 years trying to fill the void left by Madison and their lost child, but nothing seemed to work. His phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, but he ignored them, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of a woman he once barely knew, yet whose impact on his life had been monumental. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, the weight of his despair palpable. The charity concert had stirred emotions he had long buried. Emily's bright eyes, filled with admiration and innocence, haunted him. How could he have missed the signs? How could he have been so blind to the life he had potentially lost? Determined to unearth the truth, he began setting his plans into motion. "Get me the best private investigator in town," he instructed his assistant, his voice steady yet urgent. "I need to find Madison." His assistant, a young man named Jake, looked startled. Mr. Harrison, are you sure? It's been years. I don't care how long it's been. We need to find her. She's alive." "I can feel it," Lake replied, his resolve hardening. This was his chance to make things right, to confront his past, and perhaps, to reclaim the family he thought he had lost forever. Days turned into weeks as Lake threw himself into the search. He contacted shelters, hospitals, and even reached out to social workers, desperately seeking any shred of information about Madison's whereabouts. Each lead was met with the same response: silence. But he refused to give up. He flooded his contacts with inquiries, using every resource available to him. One evening, as he sat in his office, poring over maps and notes, Jake burst in with a look of excitement. "Mr. Harrison, I think we've got something." Lake's heart raced as he leaned forward, eager for news. "What is it?" "We traced a lead to a pediatric clinic on the outskirts of the city. They mentioned a Dr. Madison Reed. Could be a coincidence, but it's worth checking out." Lake felt a surge of hope as he scribbled down the address. "Get the car ready. We're going now." As they drove through the bustling streets, Lake's mind raced with possibilities. What would he say to her? Would she even want to see him after all these years? The questions swirled in his mind, making it hard to breathe. He had envisioned this moment countless times, but now that it was almost here, he felt a mix of excitement and dread. Upon arriving at the clinic, Lake's heart pounded in his chest. The building was modest yet inviting, the kind of place where children's laughter filled the air. He stepped inside, the aroma of antiseptic mingling with the faint scent of crayons. The waiting room was filled with families, and he could hear the cheerful chatter of children. Do you want me to go in with you? Jake asked, sensing Lake's apprehension. Lake shook his head, swallowing hard. No, I need to do this alone. He approached the reception desk, his nerves threatening to overwhelm him. I'm looking for Dr. Madison Reed, he said, trying to sound composed. The receptionist looked up, her expression neutral. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's urgent, he replied, his voice firm. Please, can you just tell me if she's here? After a moment of hesitation, the receptionist nodded and picked up the phone. One moment, please. Lake's heart raced as he waited, each tick of the clock amplifying his anxiety. Finally, the receptionist hung up and gestured toward a hallway. She's in room 3, just down the hall. Thank you, Lake breathed, his legs feeling heavy as he walked toward the door. Each step felt monumental, a blend of hope and fear coursing through him. He reached for the doorknob, his hand trembling as he turned it and stepped inside. The sight before him was surreal. Madison stood with her back to him, examining a child's chart, her hair cascading down her back in soft waves. He took a moment to drink in the sight of her, the woman who had once been a fleeting moment in his chaotic life, now transformed into a figure of strength and grace. Madison, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned around, and for a fleeting moment, time stood still. Her eyes widened in disbelief, recognition dawning upon her face. Lake? The sound of his name on her lips sent a jolt through him, stirring emotions he had buried for far too long. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice a mix of surprise and wariness. I've been looking for you, he replied, taking a cautious step forward. I didn't know where to find you. I thought you were gone. Madison's expression shifted, a storm of emotions playing across her features. Gone? You didn't even try to find me. You just disappeared from my life. I know, he admitted, his voice cracking. I was lost. My life fell apart after the accident. I thought you and the baby were gone. I didn't know how to cope. Madison's eyes softened, but the tension in the room lingered. You think that justifies your absence? 5 years, Lake. 5 years without a word. I know I can't change the past, but I'm here now, he said, desperation creeping into his tone. I want to know you. I want to know Emily. Her gaze sharpened. What do you know about her? She's the girl from the concert. She recognized me, Madison. She said I brought light to her life. He confessed, his heart racing. I didn't know she was mine until just recently. Please, let me be a part of her life. Madison's expression shifted again, caught between anger and vulnerability. You think it's that easy? You just waltz in here after years of silence and expect me to hand her over? No, I don't expect anything, he replied, his voice steady. I just want a chance. I want to make amends. I want to be a father to her. For a moment, silence enveloped them. The air was thick with unspoken words, a history neither could ignore. Lake could see the conflict in her eyes, the flicker of hope battling against the scars of the past. Emily doesn't just need a father. She needs stability, love, and trust, Madison finally said, her voice firm. You have to prove to me that you're serious about this. Lake nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I will. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise. As he spoke, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. This was just the beginning, a chance to rebuild and reconnect. He could finally face the past, confront his mistakes, and embrace the future. But above all, he was determined to be there for Emily, to honor the bond he had unknowingly forged with her years ago. Lake Harrison stood outside the pediatric clinic, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sun cast a warm glow over the building, but the light felt cold to him as he wrestled with the sheer weight of what lay ahead. The last 5 years had been a blur of grief and regret, each day spent in the shadow of a past he could hardly bear to revisit. Today, however, he had a chance, an opportunity to confront that past and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to make amends. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open and entered the bustling clinic. The air was filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the soft murmur of parents chatting with nurses. Lake stood for a moment, his eyes scanning the room, searching for the only person he truly wanted to see. And then he spotted her, Madison. She was bent over a small child, her long hair cascading down her back, her expression one of focused compassion. It was as if time had stood still. She looked just as beautiful as he remembered, but there was a newfound strength about her that made his heart ache. Lake took a step forward, his feet feeling heavy as he approached her. With each step, a swirl of emotions washed over him. Nostalgia, regret, fear. What would he say? Would she even want to speak to him? As he neared, Madison looked up, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Recognition flickered in her gaze, quickly replaced by a flash of disbelief. "Lake," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. The sound sent shivers down his spine. "Madison," he replied, his throat tight. Why are you here?" She interrupted him, her tone sharp and defensive. It cut through the air like a knife, and he felt the weight of her anger and hurt. "I came to see you," he managed, his voice steady despite the torrent of emotions raging within him. "I've been looking for you. I need to talk." Madison straightened, her posture tense. "Talk? About what? You think you can just waltz back into my life after everything? After you believed I was dead?" Her eyes flashed with hurt, and he could see the pain etched on her face. It was a reminder of the chasm that had formed between them. "I thought you were gone," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I lost everything that day. I didn't know." "I didn't know," she interjected, her voice rising. "Didn't know what? That you had a daughter? That I was trying to rebuild our lives? You left me with nothing but silence." Lake flinched at her words, each one a rebuke that echoed in his mind. "I was in a dark place, Madison. I thought I lost you both. I spiraled into despair. I didn't know how to handle it." Madison crossed her arms, a defensive barrier that separated them. "You didn't even try to find me. You let the world tell you I was dead, and you believed it." "I'm here now," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. "I want to make this right. I want to be a part of your life, of Emily's life. I've changed, I swear." At the mention of their daughter, Madison's expression softened, if only for a moment. "Emily, she's incredible. She's been my light, my reason to keep going." Her voice trembled slightly, and Lake could see the love she had for their daughter shining through her pain. "I want to be a part of that light," he said earnestly, stepping closer. "I've missed so much, and I can't change the past, but I want to be there for both of you. I want to be her father." Madison took a step back, shaking her head. "You think it's that easy? After everything? I had to raise her alone. Lake, you weren't there for her first steps, her first words. You weren't there when she cried at night. I had to be both mother and father." The weight of her words crashed over him, and he felt the sting of tears threatening to surface. I know I messed up, but I want to try. I want to learn how to be a father. I want to know her." Madison's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained guarded. "You can't just show up and expect everything to be okay. Trust is a fragile thing, Lake. You broke it." "I know," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "But please, give me a chance to earn it back. For Emily's sake." Just then, the door swung open, and a small figure bounded into the room, clutching a colorful drawing. Lake's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the familiar dark curls and bright eyes. It was Emily. She looked up, her face glowing with excitement. "Mom, look what I made," she exclaimed, holding out the drawing with both hands. "It's you and me, and the man who saved us." Lake's breath caught in his throat as he realized what she had said. The man who saved us. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. He stared at Emily, then back at Madison, whose face had gone pale. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Madison asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I drew him. He's the one who helped us when we were sad. Remember?" Emily looked between them, confusion knitting her brow. "Why are you two looking at each other like that?" Madison knelt down to Emily's level, her eyes wide with shock. "Honey, what do you mean? What do you know about him?" Emily glanced back at Lake, then at her mother. "I know him because he's the man who helped us when we had nothing. You always said he was important to us, Mom. You said he brought us hope." The reality of Emily's words slammed into Lake like a freight train. She had known all along. She had been aware of their connection, their shared history. A mixture of joy and despair washed over him. He wanted to reach out, to explain everything, but the words wouldn't come. "Emily," Madison started, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have. It's okay, Mom." Emily interrupted, her innocence shining through. "I wanted you to see him again. I wanted you both to be happy." Madison's eyes filled with tears, and she looked from Emily to Lake, her expression a mixture of disbelief and pain. You knew he was your father?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I did," Emily replied, tilting her head as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "You always said he was a good man, and I wanted to meet him." Lake felt his heart swell with love for the little girl who had unknowingly held their family together. "Emily," he said softly, kneeling beside Madison, "I want to be in your life. I want to be your dad." Madison's eyes bore into his, searching for sincerity. "It's not just about you, Lake. It's about Emily's well-being. She deserves stability and love." "I'll do whatever it takes," he promised, his voice steady. "I'll prove to both of you that I'm here to stay." As they stood together, the weight of the past mingling with the hope of the future, Lake realized that this moment was just the beginning. He had a long road ahead of him, filled with challenges and growth, but he was ready to embark on that journey. For Madison, for Emily, for the family he had once thought he'd lost forever. And as Madison looked at him, a flicker of understanding passed between them, a silent agreement to take this first step together. The air around them felt lighter, filled with the possibility of healing, redemption, and a love that had been waiting to bloom, even in the shadow of their shared history. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story about overcoming challenges and family love, don't forget to like the video, comment on what touched you the most, and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for our next exciting story.